Welcome to Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now you can learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property. Learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau with the Mineola law firm of Shane, Dox, Denisi, and Corker. He's a member of the Committee on Professional Ethics of the Bar Association of Nassau County and counsel to the Nassau Academy of Law. And now, here is your host for Law You Should Know, attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today, we'll learn about how to improve your credit score and understanding what credit scores and FICO scores are about. My guest is Laurie Zoock. She's a credit consultant and consumer advocate, and she works with people to improve their credit scores. Laurie, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thanks so much for having me today, Ken.
Before we talk about how it's compiled and why the credit score is so important, just tell us about what the scores mean and what the range is of scores.
Well, the scores, the most common scores are from the FICO company, Fair Isaac and Company, and range from 300 to 850 points, as used by TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. So the FICO company developed these scores to determine how risky or how credit worthy a person is in regards to getting a loan.
And these can be important to all of us because when you go to lease a car or when you go to buy something, when you go to get a mortgage, some of the lower rates and the lower payments are for people with good credit scores.
Right. Well, the higher your scores are, the lower the interest rate that you are going to pay. But one thing I will mention is that most people, you could read different studies or surveys on credit, but probably a fairly large percentage of people have errors on their credit that they're not even aware of. And because most people don't know how to actually read a credit report, they don't even understand exactly what's going on or where they're at. And if they did know, then they could correct certain things, which would, of course, increase their scores.
And in general, we will come to that and we'll discuss that in detail. But what are they looking at? How is that FICO score composed? How are they compiling it?
Percentage-wise, they're compiling it by payment history, which is 35%, by the amounts owed, which is 30%, the length of history is 15%, new credit is 10%, and a mix or types of credit is an additional 10%. So that is the mix, and it's a secret algorithm that they've put together and that each of the major credit bureaus uses.
So the one thing that's easier to understand and a little easier to control is the payment history. So when you get a bill, you should try to pay it off within 30 days so that there won't be an adverse notification of the credit reporting system.
That's correct. And so you have to be aware if your payments are actually going through or not. And the reason I say that, because, in the chair in which I sit, I hear from people all the time, is when you make online payments, for example, through online banking to your creditors, you must make sure that payment actually goes through in time, because sometimes companies may change or a company may buy out another company. And if something doesn't go through, well, it's going to come down to affecting your scores. So payment history is very important, and I generally recommend that you pay your bills like when they come in, pay them. Don't wait till the last minute.
Because that's easier to keep up and help improve your score.
Yes,
and certainly don't wait till the last minute, because whether it's electronically or by the mail, they may sit on it or it may not get to them, and it may make it late as a practical matter. And
right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just to give you an idea, a late payment, while FICO does not reveal points on most things, if you make a late payment on something, it can be anywhere from 30 to 100 points that you get a ding. It's that huge. And FICO does reveal that on a mortgage late payment, it can be a 1 to 200 point hit or possibly more. So pay everything early. Don't wait to the last minute.
And this is a way, and we'll talk about how to build your credit score if you're a young person or just, graduating high school or college. But this is an important way to start getting yourself on the right track and to building a good credit score for people young and old. Right.
We're going to try and help everybody here.
And what about the debt part for 30? What does that mean?
That's how much you owe on debt. And now, an installment debt, things are pretty much gauged out that you're paying installments, for example, like with an auto loan, or it might be a student loan, or it might be jewelry or furniture. So that the amounts that you owe are 30% of that score, but where it gets a little trickier is on revolving credit cards, like your MasterCard and Visa, for example. And so the more you owe of whatever your available limit is, the more you max out those revolving credit cards, the lower your scores will drop. It's better to pay off or pay down very low the revolving credit cards, and that helps keep the FICO scores high. Now, you have to be a little bit careful on that, because what I'm finding is that when people have scores that are maybe around 640, 620, which is considered kind of fair. It's not the greatest score. But if you pay off credit cards and you have low scores, a couple of things could happen. The credit grantor can reduce the credit line, or they can completely close down that credit card, because if they see your scores have gotten lower, then you are no longer a good risk. You're not creditworthy, and it's their choice pretty much to do that.
So are you saying you should not pay off the bill in full, or you should use the card and then pay it off?
What I'm saying is, what I'm saying is that if you have high scores over 640, you're great to just pay off your revolving credit cards. But when you have lower FICO scores and you pay off, the credit grantor has the option of dropping the available limit or possibly canceling out those credit cards. So people sometimes have high scores, but they don't know, maybe they made a late payment, and they may not be aware that their score dropped down.
And sometimes sometimes there are also charges, not insubstantial charges for late payments. And sometimes you can call and challenge it. The mail didn't come, or you had some, emergency, had the flu. And maybe they will agree to not make a negative report, and they'll agree to waive any late charge. It cannot hurt to ask, especially if it's a one-time thing.
Right. That's correct. If it's a one-time thing, you got a good chance of it. Also, if you were in an area that was affected by a natural disaster, a tornado, whatever, some type of weather thing, then a lot of times they'll look at that also, but they may notate that on the report. But you should always ask, because if you don't ask, then you don't have any chance of getting.
And what about the length? You said that was 15 points. What does that mean?
50% of your score is length of history, meaning the longer you have your cards, your revolving cards, the better. Let me also explain that when you have good credit, even if it's closed out from years ago, that credit can stay indefinitely on your report, whereas bad credit lines have a limitation, usually of 7 years on non-governmental debt. But for length of history for current, I'll use myself as an example, Kim. I've got 2 credit cards with perfect payment history that I pay off. I just pay them off. And one is 15 years old, and the other is 20 years old. Those 2, plus my car lease, which I actually pay a month and a half early every month or so, what that does is it kicks my score up from so many years of having perfect payment history and having it for so long that my scores are in the 820 range.
Okay, well, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thanks.
So is it best to keep the same credit cards going, or to, close it? Okay. And you can always ask the credit card company to waive the fee. Sometimes they'll try to impose a fee. Maybe it's been free. Maybe the first year was free. The worst they can say is no. And you can threaten to leave them because someone else is offering a free card.
You can, but one thing you should know is that if you close a good credit line, it will actually drop your scores.
Oh, I'm not saying you should close it. I'm saying you should make the threat.
Oh, okay.
If you had the first year free,
right.
And they want to impose a free, assuming you have a good credit with them, they want to now impose a fee. You can ask them to waive it for another year, and who knows, they might do that.
Yeah, a lot of them actually will do that if they see that you've paid off everything and you're running on time. So if you're doing that, then you've got a really good chance of not having to pay any additional fee. And another little tip too is rotate you don't want to have too many credit cards, because a lender might look at you down the road and say, oh my gosh, you have 10 credit cards and you have $100,000 in available credit, and that can actually hinder you in terms of certain types of loans like a mortgage. They almost look at you as a risk. You
said also it's not good to max any of them out.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what about the new part? You said new is 10%?
New is 10%. Now, that's interesting to me because I don't generally apply for credit, but when you apply for credit, there is, there's a point ding when you apply through a lender. If I apply for, credit cards, we're going to say it's probably roughly about 5 points per credit card company. So they say that accounts for 10%. Even though that's what FICO says, I have not actually seen that, but maybe because my scores are high. If you don't have a lot of credit, it may be able to help you in the fact that you're applying for maybe 2 or 3 credit cards. You may take the point ding, but over time it will compensate as long as you have that perfect payment history and length of history, and that you're making your payments on time.
Okay, and what is that last 10% for?
The last 10% is FICO's secret algorithm looks at what mix of credit you have. Do you have revolving credit? Do you have installment credit? What types of lines of credit do you have? And so they like to see a mix. Again, they don't give you the answer because they don't give up their algorithm, but you want to be able to have, for an example, an installment loan looks good. Having a few credit cards looks good. Having a mortgage looks good.
So it's like perhaps a bonus for being a good credit risk.
Right.
Now,
exactly.
We've been talking about paying off credit cards early, paying off lease payments early or on time. So for mortgage payments, for rent payments, it's also important to do that as well.
Right. I mean, as far as important debts to pay, yes, don't miss a mortgage payment, because I'm sure if you miss a mortgage payment, like I said earlier, it would be 100 to 200 point hit, and then you know what? They could probably accelerate and try and foreclose the loan because it's a secured loan. And
also, there could be payments. It's going to create a lot of problems.
Yes, and also important debts to pay would be your car, because you don't want it repossessed. Those are actual things, physical things that can be taken away from you, and it will affect your credit report severely.
Okay, I think you've told us a lot so far about the secrets behind the credit report and how to keep your numbers up. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll learn a whole lot more from Laurie Zoock. She's a credit consultant and consumer advocate, and as you can see, a credit expert. You're listening to Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York, and also over the internet at nccradio.org. We'll be back in a moment.
This portion of programming on WHPC is brought to you on behalf of the Nassau County Bar Association, who wants you to know about ADR, Alternate Dispute Resolution, which can help you avoid costly, lengthy, and uncertain litigation in court. By resolving disputes through mediation or arbitration, it gives you control over who decides your case. A mediator helps all parties to reach an agreement they can live with, or an arbitrator selected by the parties hears and decides the case. Your attorney can still represent you, but you control who decides your case. ADR is faster and less stressful than fighting in court, and it is a great way to resolve divorce, employment, or commercial disputes. ADR is now offered through the Nassau County Bar Association. Find out more about how ADR can help resolve your dispute by calling 516-747-4070 or visit nassaubar.org.
Once again, we continue with Law You Should Know. From the Mineola Law Firm of Shane, Dox, Denise, Corker, and Sauer, here is attorney Kenneth J. Landau.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome back. We're talking with Laurie Zoock about how to improve your credit score. And Laurie, let's just go back to a young person, a college student just starting out. Maybe they're going to graduate. They want to get their own credit card and build a credit score as they start a career and start adulthood. What's the best way to do that?
A couple different ways, Ken. What they can do is go to their bank or credit union and apply for secured credit cards, which are backed by their own money, in the bank account. And an important thing on secured credit cards is to try and get, most of them nowadays do report to all three credit bureaus. The reason why is down the road, as they continue to make perfect payment history and use those cards, it'll help their scores. But when they go to apply for a mortgage, the mortgage companies got to use the middle score numerically of the three credit bureaus. But secured credit cards is a pretty simple way to start out. The other way that students or young people can start out is to become an authorized user on one of their parents' accounts. And so what that means is if the parent has a credit card that has perfect payment history, that they pay off, and it's a good credit line, they can add their child to that account as an authorized user. Now, as an authorized user, the student or child has no responsibility as far as anything happening. So if they're an authorized user on the parent's account and everything is always paid on time, then great. That history from the parent will add on to their credit report and will benefit them in terms of points. So the longer the parent has had that credit card with that perfect payment history, the more it will affect the child or the students. To help them. There's also a myth, and you can tell us if it's true, that a department store credit card might be easier for the student to get? Well, the department store, it might be easier for them to get, but does it report to one, two, or all three bureaus? So if it only reports to one or two, it's okay, but thinking long term, because most people do want to look to buy a home down the road, and that mid-score is important, you want to try and get a store card that reports to all three credit bureaus.
And once you're starting your credit life, which they don't really learn about before that, and it's kind of a shock when they have trouble getting a credit card, and that's why the ideas you gave are very good. They want to keep that credit score on an upward trajectory, so it's like a rocket ship. It goes high and it stays high.
Exactly.
And why is that so important for adults and for young people?
Well, because the FICO score is important because it's used for most loans, and it determines your credit worthiness or riskiness. So it's all pretty much an automated system at this point, the way that it's done. There's no handshake anymore, like in the old days, the lenders are going to look at what is that score, because that score is what they are using to determine whether or not to give you a loan. And another thing that you should know about the FICO score, there's not just one FICO score, Kenneth. There's multiple FICO scores, each slightly different. So, for example, an auto lender is going to have an auto FICO score. A mortgage company is going to have a mortgage FICO score. Credit card company is going to have a credit FICO score. And an insurance company is going to have an insurance FICO score. So there are different FICO scores, and they're not necessarily all the same number. So that's how they're using it to determine, are you worth giving a loan to, or are you someone that's very risky and they don't think they're going to get their money back?
And so there are, and not just the loan, but the lowest interest on a loan,
correct,
the lowest cost for insurance, and some, I've heard some employers are considering them as well, using them to consider whether you're a good job candidate.
Yes, and you have to sign something to release that to them. They can't just go in and pull your credit. You have to give an approval for that. But it's also used in classified jobs. Police departments, they also use that as well. They're looking to see what kind of a person are you, and they're basing it upon how what your responsibility and accountability is to your money situation.
So that's why it's more important than ever in this modern, high-tech, automated society we live in. Now, you mentioned at the beginning about errors. So what are some common errors, and what can someone do about them?
Okay, well, there are errors that are made sometimes. Let me back up a little bit. I'll tell you how I look at a credit report, and that might help. The first thing I look at is not the scores. The first thing I actually look at is the personal information on the credit card or on the credit report. I want to see the names. Are there variations? Are there issues as far as the addresses? Did you live at all of those addresses? Do you have multiple Social Security numbers? Is your file a merged file? So there's a lot of information I look at in the personal information section. And when you dispute things with the credit bureaus, there's specific rules. You can type up your disputes with your personal information. That's the first thing you want to get corrected if there's something wrong. And then you also have to include 2 forms of ID, one a photo like a driver's license or a passport, and then the other could be like a birth certificate or Social Security card. And they must be readable, your ID, when you send in a dispute. Because if they're not readable, then the credit bureau is going to just kick it back to you, and they're not going to try and correct anything. Now, where it becomes hard, though, too, Kenneth, is that a lot of times the creditors that you're doing business with, they may be misspelling your name, or they may have incorrect information. And so when you dispute with the credit bureaus, they'll typically respond back within 30 days, and they'll tell you why they did or did not fix something. Disputing with the credit bureaus, I want to discuss one thing real quick with you, too, is
Sure.
Most people think that those letters are actually read, and 99% of the time when you dispute with the credit bureaus, they're not read. They are optically scanned. There are, I believe, 22 dispute codes. It's converted into an email verification system between when you send out a dispute to the 3 credit bureaus. Those bureaus use this automated system to the creditors and collection agencies. So basically, they're just pushing buttons, and it zaps back and forth until you get a final result back from the credit bureaus. So there's something called the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is a federal law that states that things are supposed to report accurately on your report. The key thing is try to get proof of what it is that you are saying is not being reported accurately. Because if you dispute something and say, hey, it's not mine, they don't care. It's an automated system. But if you have actual documentation to prove what you're saying, then you have a better chance of getting things corrected both through the credit bureaus and through the creditors.
And it might help if you have paper receipts or some type of receipt verifying when a payment was made.
Correct. And what I find, people who have low FICO scores generally don't save paperwork. So it's very important that when you have important papers, I tell people to scan it into your computer. If you don't need to keep the hard copy, scan it into your computer so that down the road you don't have another problem. You have to open mail. You have to look at your credit card bills. Most people don't read what's on their credit card bills, and so there could be mistakes in the credit card bills themselves. You got to actually read it.
And I just want to go back to one thing you may have covered earlier. When you apply for new credit and and you're giving them permission to access your credit report, do you lose some points for that if too many people look at your credit report?
Yes. Okay, that's a good question. If you're pulling your own credit, no points taken off. If you give a lender permission to pull your credit, points are taken off. Where you must be especially cautious is if in a mortgage, if you're going to different mortgage companies, multiple different mortgage companies, and they're all pulling your credit, or if you're buying a car at a dealer and they run your credit 10 or 20 times. If you remember, I said it's probably about 5-point hit on that. So you could lose tons of points. So one of the things that I do, or I tell people to do, is limit that lender from the pulls. If you're going in to buy a car, bring in a piece of paper and it should say, only pull my credit one time, and make them sign it. And I'm not joking, because I've seen clients lose 100 points by applying for a car because the dealer is saying, hey, we're going to try and get you better financing. In reality, what they're doing is they're dropping your score with all those dings, and then you are going to pay a higher interest rate.
which they may make a big commission on.
Exactly. It's all about the money.
Because those advertised lease rates are only for prime credit scorers, and they can make a lot more money selling you their own financing.
Exactly. I mean, why do these companies want you not to fix your credit, not to know how it works? Because the less you know about it, the better chance they have of keeping your scores down, because you don't know how it works, and therefore you're going to pay a lot more in interest rates than someone who is knowledgeable.
And you become desperate, and it's like those signs that say, no credit refused. They won't refuse it, but they're going to charge you a price for giving you a loan. We just have a moment or two left, and I know there were other points you wanted to cover, so I'm just going to turn it over to you for that minute.
Okay, sure. I'll give you a few more things that you should know. When you got a complaint about errors in your score and you have legitimate errors, if you have proof, like I said, you can try and resolve it through the bureaus, the creditors, the collectors. But there's also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where you can go online to consumerfinance.gov and file complaints, and that agency may be able to help you. Also, most places, there are regulatory agencies for different types of credit lines, and they may be able to help you. But one thing I do want people to know is to be cautious when you do credit monitoring, because everybody likes to use Credit Karma or one of these credit monitoring services, but what they don't realize is that they're not showing you FICO scores, they're showing you something called Vantage scores, which is a different scoring model. So people get upset when they look at their scores, and then they have their real FICO scores pulled, and it could be 50 points lower than what you see online. So that's what you have to know about that. Checking your personal information, I said that's very important. You need to go through each credit line and look at different things. So I think the last point, Ken, I'll make is that non-governmental debt that is negative, bad credit lines, things that you've messed up on, can only stay on your report for 7 years from the date you went initially delinquent, unless you restarted payment again. Then that restarts that 7-year clock. After 7 years, it's got to come off the report. And also, each state has a statute of limitations for collections. So, for example, I'm in Florida. There's a 5-year statute of limitations for collections.
Right, I just want to mention, because we're running out of time, that sometimes collectors will call you up, and that it may be too late to collect that debt, so they're not going to tell you that. So that's why you want to ask for proof, as is your right.
Exactly.
Nothing stops them from claiming you owe money. Listen, we're running out of time. Just give us your contact information on email and Facebook.
Great. Well, on Facebook, I'm Credit Education Consultants. My website is crediteducationconsultants.com, and people can reach me at 813-500-6064. And
also by email to consumercreditteacher@gmail.com. I'd like to thank Laurie Zoock for being our guest. If you missed any part of this program or want to tell someone else about it, just go to nccradio.org. You're listening to 90.3, the WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, Long Island, New York.